What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Usually we begin the video by setting up a stage as if you are a person inside Russia, but today let's start in another country. So, imagine you're walking through Baku, Azerbaijan's capital. You are a Russian citizen who escaped Moscow back in February 2022 for obvious reasons, found a remote job, and just is quietly building your life far away from home. You've got your laptop, your badge from a local IT company, maybe a warm coffee in your hand. The war in Ukraine feels far away. You almost forgot it is even happening. The Kremlin's propaganda feels like static in the background, and then, in a snap, it's not. Armed men grab you. You are face down on the sidewalk. Someone's yelling in a language you half understand. And you're not a criminal, you're not even involved. But suddenly you're a pawn in a game being played 2,000 kilometers away inside Moscow's Kremlin. Because somewhere in Yekaterinburg, the Russian police decided to stir up some nationalist outrage by cracking down Azerbaijanis. And Baku decided to, obviously, return the favor. But here is where it gets really different. The Kremlin, this almighty powerhouse that invades neighbors, jails its critics, rewrites history books, and sells fear like candy, does absolutely nothing. No threats, no fear statements, no Medvedev promising nuclear hellfire on Telegram. They just sit there, stunned, embarrassed, because for once the victim was not a powerless Tajik of a poor Uzbek construction worker. It was a whole state, a whole country, a state with oil, money and friends in high places. A state that does not take xenophobia lightly, a state ruled not by exactly very democratic leader. A leader who is capable of doing things most civilized Western countries will never even attempt. As soon as the playing field levels at least a little, Putin and his cronies run away in fear, not knowing how to respond. Shows his really true colors, doesn't it? So today, let's crack open this rotten matryoshka doll of lies, fear and geopolitical cowardice. Because this is not just a story of arrests and cancelled concerts, it's a full-blown diplomatic fiasco. One that shows exactly what happens when Putin's brutal theater of repression runs up against someone who hits back. Not the first time it happened, definitely not the last. Especially as Kremlin's friends and enemies observe and take notes. Let's start at the crime scene, or whatever passed for one in the twilight zone of Russian law enforcement. The official story is that it's about a murder. Not just any murder, a 2001 cold case, which somehow, after sitting ignored for 24 years, becomes a national priority. How convenient. And how specific that all the suspects just happen to be Azerbaijani immigrants. What a lucky break for a regime desperately in need for a new punching bag. But the outcome was not just arrest, reports and mugshots. 2 of those Azerbaijani men ended up dead. Dead not from resisting arrests, but from whatever brutality the cops thought wouldn't raise eyebrows. Well, unfortunately for them, and for the whole Russia at this point, it did raise the eyebrows. In Azerbaijan, this was not viewed as justice, it was seen as ethnic cleansing wrapped in righteous retribution. Of course, Russia has done this dance before. Harass the migrant workers, pin crimes of entire nationalities, film FSB raids on crowded dormitories, and post them online like it's some kind of a TikTok challenge. Like the trendy music is missing only. It's an old tactic. You use poor brown bodies to distract from your collapsing economy and a war you keep losing. The Z-bloggers foam at the mouth. Solovyov is in another toxic spitting trance. The Duma scribbles new anti-immigrant laws, and no one dares to ask where their pensions went. Because besides evil Ukrainians, people now have vengeful Azerbaijanis to worry about. Or at least this is who they are told to worry about. Them first, your own well-being second, if it ever comes to worrying about your own self, I guess. But something snapped this time. This was not targeting a voiceless minority. This was poking a sovereign state with teeth. Within a day, Azerbaijanians struck back, and not with just words. They arrested Russian nationals on their own soil. They stormed Sputnik's Baku office. They cancelled Russian concerts and cultural events. They told the Kremlin, if you want to play dirty, we will get in the mud with you. And guess what? Putin saw the response, gulped, turned around without blinking, and quietly left. Is this the reaction of a country's president when his fellow countrymen get arrested? Not in the most countries, but, well, we are talking about Putin's Russia. Let's now talk about his reaction in more details in our next chapter. Now let's talk about the Kremlin's reaction, or should I say the lack of one. You'd expect a firestorm, you'd expect Margarita Simonyan to be crying about Russophobia on state TV, you'd expect Medvedev to draft a 1,000-worm hate poet to Baku, accusing Azerbaijani of being a Western puppet and threatening to turn the Caspian Sea into a radioactive crater. But no, silence. The kind of silence that only cowards and cornered animals ever produce. Even their response was pathetic. A vague statement about concerns over the lack of communication during the raid on Sputnik's office. Not the raid itself, just that the phones were off. Not the arrests. Not the fact that Russian citizens were beaten and dragged through foreign jails like nobodies. Just a sad little footnote about missed calls. That's the diplomatic equivalent of texting "Yup?" to someone who just slapped you and humiliated you in public. And this is not just cowardice, it is selective cowardice. Because when Germany, for example, deports some shady Russian people, the whole Duma starts hyperventilating. When a European country bans Russia today, Russia goes full Cold War. But Azerbaijan? Not a peep, because, well, they know the rules are different when the other guy can actually fight back. When the other guy has Erdogan on speed dial and controls half of your black market trade routes and shadow fleet. One angry call from Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, and a big chunk of your war money just simply disappears. That's in addition to China also having big economic influence over Russia that we spoke a couple of episodes back. So it looks like Putin's friends are not much of friends after all. What a surprise. Everyone takes advantage when Putin is weak, everyone has some sort of control and leverage over him, and he cannot do anything about it, because he depends on his very few friends who are left too much, in case he wants to continue the invasion going. That is the dilemma Putin put himself into. It is almost poetic. The regime that parades around as a nuclear superpower is now too scared to defend its own journalists. The country that invented performative rage is suddenly out of breath, because deep down they know they can bomb cities, but they cannot win an actual confrontation with someone who will not take the bait. So, who is it that Putin still can fight against? Let's talk about it in our next chapter. Now let's talk about who the Kremlin can fight, because it is certainly not Azerbaijan. It is the guy sweeping floors in Moscow Mall, it's the woman selling strawberries at the local market, it's a teenage boy from Dagestan getting dragged out of a dorm at midnight because the FSB needs to flex for cameras. That's the enemy they like, powerless, voiceless, and very easy to frame. Why? Because scapegoating immigrants is the only domestic policy this regime has left. Inflation? Blame the immigrants. No jobs? Guess what? Blame the immigrants again. Your son died in Ukraine for no reason. Well, at least the police just kicked in the door of Kyrgyz family, so everything must be fine, right? And it works. For a while. The propaganda machine spins its gears, state TV blasts footage of ethnic crime, Duma members pass laws banning immigrants' kids from going to local schools, biometric surveillance expands, all this kind of stuff. Even police raids are now being televised like at a daily TV show. And the public, fed up and disoriented, just eats it up. It's the reality TV fascism, served on a hot and nationalistic. But here is where it falls apart. The moment your cruelty crosses a border to a country that cares, the illusion completely shatters. Because unlike the victims of your own domestic oppression, other states have embassies, they have militaries, they have presidents who are not afraid to respond. Azerbaijan did not file a complaint. They raided just simply Russian officers on camera and dared to Kremlin to say anything. What you gonna do about it, they pretty much said. And the Kremlin, so used to bullying smaller other nations, just curled into a ball and went completely silent. And what does that tell to the world? That Russia, that so-called protector of all things Russian, will not even lift a finger when its own citizens get arrested abroad, as long as the perpetrator obviously has oil and some kind of leverage. So the very next time you hear Putin invaded Ukraine and justifying it that he needs to protect Russians, you can just simply laugh straight to the face of that person. Every IT guy in Baku knows they are expendable now. Every journalist working for Russia today knows they are on their own. The message is clear. Putin will start wars, but not for you. If that's still not clear enough that this is the only reason for the invasion is so Putin can stay in power, Well, guys, I don't know what else will. Putin's Russia likes to imagine itself as an empire, a reborn superpower rising from the ashes of the Soviet collapse. The only problem, well, it cannot protect its people. Not from poverty, not from war, not externally, not internally, nothing. Not from foreign retaliation, not from anything. All it can do is just put on a show. And this is what this was, a show. The raid in Yekaterinburg, staged for nationalist voters. The arrests, a distraction from economic collapse. The silence after Baku's retaliation, well, just unfortunate, poorly timed intermission. Because behind the curtain there is nothing. No strategy, no strength, just fear. Putin's regime survives on fear, but only when it flows one way. Terrify the masses and you rule them. Terrify your neighbors and you control them. But get terrified yourself, well, that's it. Game over. Azerbaijan proved that. They did not launch missiles, they did not issue ultimatums, they just used the Kremlin's own playbook against them. And the result? Putin looked weak, pathetic, like a playground bully who cries when somebody finally punches him back in the face. Even Russia's far-right blogs are panicking. Their posts now read like therapy sessions. How could this happen, they say. Why aren't we responding? Is Baku, by the way, historically Russian territory? Should we do a special military operation? They cannot even stick to one narrative. Half of them want war with Azerbaijan, the other half know that this war would mean conflict with Turkey, and that is a door or can of worms nobody in Moscow wants to open. So the regime does what it always does when scared. Nothing. And hopefully regular people of Russia see it as well. Just push a little bit harder against the regime, get together, stand your ground, and the illusion of invincibility falls apart faster than anyone could ever imagine. We can do it, guys. We need to do it. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. The best way to support my work is through Patreon memberships. The link is down below. You can get additional chapters every episode. Thanks much for watching. See you tomorrow. We want to come to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.